My name is Ronald Ross, retired Colonel, U.S. Army. I did 30 years of active duty service. I went to a private military academy, Norwich University in Vermont. I graduated in 1986. I was commissioned second lieutenant. So you go, the rank structure is second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, colonel, and then you get into the general officer ranks, brigadier general and higher, to 1 star to a 4 star. I was commissioned a second lieutenant in 1986.
Okay. And during your service, what sort of bases were you assigned to and where did you travel?
My first assignment coming out of the Office of Basic Course, I was assigned to Germany, 15 Trans Battalion. Back then in the 80s, it was during the Cold War, so there was 2 corps there, a lot of U.S. soldiers, over 250,000 soldiers that were there. You do your platoon leader time. Those are usually your first assignments as a lieutenant. And then you try to get to the next part, which is your first lieutenant, and then to captain. So you take various assignments as platoon leader, executive officer, wanting to come and do your company command time. So that's when you become a captain. So my first assignment was in Stuttgart, Germany. I was part of 7th Corps. Again, very large contingency back then because of the Cold War, and our main mission was deterring the Soviet Union, USSR back then. The wall was up, the Berlin Wall. During my last stint, my last tour there, the Berlin Wall came down, and that's when everything kind of changed from Cold War, and Desert Storm kicked off. So all our units that deployed to Desert Storm, the military restructured back then and started pulling more and more forces out of Europe and bringing them back stateside because the Cold War was over and there was no need to have such a large contingency outside the United States. After that assignment, again, Desert Storm, after that it was stationed in Fort Eustis, Virginia. Then after that, I did my company command early. So you have to take assignments after your company command of, back then was recruiting, ROTC or readiness group. I chose readiness group and got assigned to West Point, where I was there for a couple of years, working with the Reserve National Guard units, helping them train and get ready for wartime activities. Then soon after that, I went back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I spent a good part of my time as a company commander. I was airborne qualified, so therefore I like to stay in the light units. Again, spent another 17 years in and out of airborne units throughout the United States and Europe. Most of my assignments after that were in stateside, then followed by Italy. I did a stint there with the Joint Task Force there. It was a pretty unique time. We were doing stabilization operations in Kosovo, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Serbia. So I spent a lot of time in the Balkans. We're doing peacekeeping operations and security operations, trying to stop the atrocities that were going on from the war. So it was combat operations, but it was not combat operations because we were just trying to stop him from committing genocide. So I spent a lot of time in the Balkans during that time. Then I came back to CONUS, and after you do a lot of operation time, they want you to do some staff time. So I was assigned to Forces Command and Fort McPherson, Georgia, and FORSCOM is in charge of all U.S. forces throughout the United States. They command everything. Very large. It's a 4-star command, a very large command. And that's when everything changed. I was a major at the time, and 9/11 happened. I was there. During that time, I was brought into, after 9/11, the U.S. was trying to figure out what they were going to do. So I was part of a team that was put together with a special operations unit to go into Afghanistan, um, to get back and look for Osama bin Laden and to, bring the fight to those that were responsible for 9/11. So that kind of changed my whole military career right there. I was a major, kind of a senior major, about the 10-year, 11-year mark. So after that, I spent the next almost 20 years in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan. So my first time was with Task Force Dagger for Special Forces Group. There's all kinds of movies about that time that you see on TV. So I was part of that task force because of the skill set that I had and what I did. And so we went into Afghanistan. I thought it would be a short stint. We'd be home by Christmas. And then we realized that this was going to go from special operations type operations to more of a conventional. And that's when the buildup started in Afghanistan. While simultaneously, when I left there, went back again. And then it was time for the U.S. was now going to inevitably invade uh, Iraq. So I spent my time back over in the Middle East, uh, doing plans, surveilling locations for a Western invasion into Baghdad once the war was declared and the U.S. was moving into Iraq. So I spent my time there, and I came back. I was selected for lieutenant colonel. I went to a brigade. I finally went to back to Fort Eustis, Virginia, and I went from the special ops community into back into the conventional forces, where I was a brigade S3, and that was now my long term uh, partner fight into Iraq. I spent our brigade had all the logistics and transportation for everything moving from Kuwait throughout all Iraq, moving troops, equipment, supplies, and that was probably the toughest time. The first time really involved in real, day to day combat operations. Our units transited the most dangerous roads in the world at that time. Afghanistan was kind of falling off a little bit, and Iraq was really starting to get hot. So most of our concentration was in Iraq and the buildup, and that's what we did. We had convoys on the roads, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year. I spent a lot of time out on the roads, and it was a very unique and very hard mission. But you know, it it was it was a very unique time. After we redeployed after a year, came back home. Uh, I was selected for battalion command, so I moved from Fort Eustis, Virginia, from the job that I had, went to back to Fort Bragg, commanding an airborne battalion, and as soon as I got there, I got orders again to go back to Afghanistan for 15 months with my battalion. Then mission changed, and we ended up going back to Iraq for another 15 months, doing the same exact thing I did prior to that for 12 months. But instead of me being the brigade responsible for battalions conducting the operations, it was my battalion that was now on the ground completely doing the operations. We did that for 15 months, came back, changed out, was selected for, at that time was lieutenant colonel, selected for colonel, supposed to go to the war college. But then I was moved back to Fort McPherson, where I was part of Third Army, part of ARCENT, which was responsible for Iraq and Afghanistan altogether. Because of all the experience I had and all the deployments I had, I was put back into the G4 at Arcent, where again I was deployed back forward again. I was in every country in the Middle East during that time, and then finally, they were doing a buildup in Afghanistan, and I went back to Afghanistan to be the chief of staff for a new element that was set up in Kabul, and then we spent another year there in Kabul. It was a pretty unique place, a lot happening. It was the center of everything going on. The U.S. Embassy was there, so there's a lot of activity that went along, you know, in that part of the world. And then finally, after that, um, bring in more deployments at that assignment. And then finally, I was allowed to go back to the war college. That's where when you're selected for colonel, if you're going to be selected for brigade command, you go off and they send you to get your master's degree at one of the senior service colleges. I ended up going to the Air Force Senior Service College in Maxwell Air Force Base, where I got a master's in strategic studies, national security. Did that, went to school for a year. My family stayed in place where they were in Georgia because I had children that were in high school at the time. And then during that time, I was selected for brigade command, serving as a colonel. You have a company command as a captain, battalion command as a lieutenant colonel, and a brigade command as a colonel. So after that, I went was stationed in Texas where I did a brigade command. It was a joint command, so I was there for 4 years, and that started bringing me up to my late 20 years in the military. And then after brigade command, uh, I decided it was time to start thinking about retirement. So I went back to um, to my regular branch, and I was assistant commandant for my last year at the U.S. Army Transportation School, where we trained the next generation of officers, for their career fields. It was a very rewarding job. Throughout those years and throughout that time, as you coach, teaching, and mentoring, young officers, non-commissioned officers, and soldiers, they ask you why you did this for so long, and and why would you do something like this here and be gone from your family? I've not total, even though I talk kind of quick about everything. I had three combat tours in Iraq, three combat tours in Afghanistan. The question will always come: why would you continue to do this life? Why would you keep deploying to these places? And I used to say it was so my children wouldn't have to do it, never realizing how long this war would go. And one of the officers who worked for me later on ended up being my son's battalion commander, and my son was deployed. Uh, my middle son, he was commissioned, and he was part of the 25th Infantry Division, uh, where I was just retiring, and now my children were starting to go into that career field of the military. I never encouraged them. To be honest, I never really wanted them to do it because I know what it was like. I know what I went through, and I didn't want them to do that. Uh, but my second son, he got commissioned, deployed, came back, and then he went to selection and went to the special operations community, where he later on again deployed as a team leader and went off to Syria, and there's kind of some crazy times going on there. While my youngest son uh, joined the military at the age of 17 in high school, went to college. He went to Mass Maritime Academy. He stayed in the National Guard for Mass National Guard, and then eventually he transferred to the 20 Special Forces Group of Massachusetts, and he went to selection. He took a semester off at Mass Maritime, uh, made it through selection, finished his time at Mass Maritime, had a nice job as a mariner, as a ship's captain, but decided to continue the military life. And then he finally went through, finished the Q course, caught his long tap for a Green Beret, and then later on he was deployed. He was a Russian speaker and French speaker. My other son was an Arabic speaker. So our family kind of revolved to a military type family, even though that's not what we wanted. And, it's pretty tough watching your children go through this life. You don't understand it. It's easier when it's for you, and it was easier for my wife to watch me deploy. My children were small, but it was very difficult as parents to, eventually watch our children deploy to places, there where there's conflict, there's war, and we all know what happens in those kind of places. So that's it's kind of my life story. I mean, I could get very detailed in a lot of different things and a lot of aspects of it. But anytime you're in, you know, combat locations, Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, it was the life that it was. Um, a lot of people tell their war stories. I don't, you know what happened. You know what you did. You know what you had to do. You knew why you did it. Um, what always motivated me and drove me was, just to make sure you could, bring everybody home. Oh, because right now,
One of their first deployments was near the end of the war, the Cold War. They saw the Berlin Wall fall. So I know from all the books I've read and the history I've known that that was a very joyous moment for many.
well, so that was somewhat true and somewhat not true. The uh, the German people, they had family that was over there because they allowed us to travel into East Berlin. You had to wear a uniform. It was all special passes, go through all these checkpoints. It was very difficult to do, but we would take leave and go into East Germany. You know, and it was very strange. Uh, it was kind of a false. So during the daytime, it looked like Berlin was a hustle and bustle before the wall came down, and as you would go around, it looked like everybody was doing something. And then when nighttime came, everybody was gone. Nobody lived in Berlin on the east side. They lived in all the outskirts towns, so it was kind of a facade that the Russians, uh, were showing this other life, and it wasn't there. At nighttime, we would go back in there, go to the restaurants, and we would be the only ones in there eating. It was very cheap, and they liked U.S. money because back then the U.S. dollar was so high against it. And then there would be nobody there, and then we would leave, go back over, back through Checkpoint Charlie, go back into the western side. And then it would be the next day, like when you go shopping, they would have like one of each thing. And once that sold, then the store closed down. But when the wall finally came down, people were rejoiced and happy. But they started coming from east to the west and kind of overwhelmed the west at the time. In some of the big cities, they were taking, apartments, getting money from the government. So the people at first were a little bit apprehensive when that all happened. Because we were big into the German communities back then, that the military liked uh, doing events with Germans. So a buddy of mine, he played for Cornell, and we're big hockey players. So we ended up playing on a German local hockey team, to be part of the community. And it was always this rift between, military, like an occupational force slash, the big US and Germany at the time. The Germans liked the Americans to a degree. Um, but again, I'm sure there was still some, dissension, you know. So, but it was very unique watching the wall come down and what it is today, you know.
Yeah, some of my friends from high school are dual citizens. Their father's from Germany, so they go back there every other year or so. Once when they're over there for the summer, they came back and brought me a magnet with a chunk of the Berlin Wall glued to it.
Oh, yeah, and I had pieces of that. We lost them. We had, because when we went there, we picked up some pieces and, throughout the moves, because we moved every 2 to 3 years, and so I don't know whatever happened to it. I think the moves might have taken it for one time. Had barbed wire and parts of the wall, good sized pieces, but then they all disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. But it's okay. I got enough pictures and stuff in my memory to remind me of the place.
Yeah. I'm noticing, yeah, I see like from where there's chips, like there's layers of spray paint, and the people graffitiing, probably protest messages and all that.
They did. Yeah, they did.
So you said after Germany, after the Berlin Wall, then you went back to the U.S. and then after that,
Went to the advanced course, and then I went and did my readiness time. And I went to West Point, about Newburgh, where West Point is located. And I did readiness. So we trained the Reserve and National Guard for deployments, and then Desert Storm kicked off. So we spent our whole time, preparing Reserve and National Guard units to deploy to Saudi Arabia during that time. So it was pretty hectic time, pretty fast paced time. Uh, it was an okay time. That was actually a time that I actually thought about getting out of the military, because I finished my commitment from when I graduated. I went to a military school, so I owed X amount of years because I was I did ROTC, and you signed a contract for X amount of years, and I did that and I fulfilled it. And the military was kind of a iffy. I didn't know if I wanted to stay, but then we ended up actually staying, and then went to Fort Bragg, and then I started to love the military, and I loved it when I was a lieutenant. I didn't like my time, what I was doing with ACRC. I did not enjoy that time at all. Did not like it. So I thought about getting out, and I was going to get out. And one of my old bosses, from when I was a platoon leader in Germany, he was a battalion commander at Bragg, and that's how you kind of do things sometimes. You coattail with people, leaders that you had that you loved and admired. They seek you out and say, hey, why don't you come get stationed here, be one of my company commanders. So that's what I ended up doing. That's how I ended up at Fort Bragg. And I loved that community. I loved being in North Carolina at Fort Bragg. It was a great assignment, big post, a lot going on, airborne operations. There was just so much there. It was very work gratifying. The camaraderie was great. So they had that different spirit that some places don't have, especially ACRC, what I was doing prior to that. You don't have that. And then when you go to places like Fort Bragg, it's like, it's the best place in the military to ever be stationed, because there's so much going on there. It's the heartbeat of the military. So everything's there. The special ops community's there. The conventional forces are there. It's just a great place to be. So love that time.
so then after that was when you went to Bosnia, Croatia, and Italy.
So after that assignment there, I got sent to CTAF, which was the Southern European Task Force. It was located in Vicenza, Italy. It's actually called Little 82nd Airborne. So Big 82nd Airborne is at Fort Bragg. So being in the airborne community, it's a small community. So a lot of 82nd guys go from Fort Bragg to Vicenza, Italy. Then after Vicenza, Italy, they come back to Fort Bragg. So because of the position that I was going to, it required you had to be airborne qualified, which is not a big deal. But I knew a lot of the commanders from the 82nd. They were going to command battalions and brigades and at CTAF. So I kind of knew a lot of from the 82nd at that time. I knew a lot of people that were going there, so it was kind of an easy thing to do. And that's actually how I ended up there. And then the battalion that I was in, they fell under an organization that was located in Germany, and they had the responsibility for what was going on in Bosnia Herzegovina. all the support elements, all the combat units were all coming out of Germany and going down, and then there was also stateside units that were coming into Bosnia-Herzegovina at the time. So our battalion had the mission there because our brigade had the mission there. So I ended up spending. We were there in CTAF for 3 years, and out of my 3 years, I probably spent 2.5 years in and out of Bosnia-Herzegovina, and then Kosovo had kicked off, which ended up being a 100-year, a 100-day air war campaign. And everyone knows the history lesson on that one there. So Bosnia-Herzegovina, Kosovo, Serbia were kind of all over the place. The heartbreaking thing I think about those things was, the human tragedies that went along with it. There were mass graves, and we're at Sarajevo, and before that the Olympics were there, and then you look at this devastated city, and where the Olympics were held, and you're looking around, and we're at the stadium, and they're shooting at each other. I mean, just a crazy, crazy time, and I think that was my first real look at the human tragedy of things. It isn't so much the war between factions; it's the citizens, the civilians that are impacted by such brutality. And then you see that later on as you go into places like Iraq and Afghanistan. You see the human side of it. So I think being in the Balkans for as long as I was, you start to become a little numb to things. You see atrocities. We go into towns and places, and there's mass graves over there. There's mass graves over there, and with all the entities that were there, NATO and UN. You start to see all the travesties of war. It wasn't the U.S. war, but you see what people, how brutal people are on people. And I think that helped me, it prepared me more for when it was the U.S.'s turn on, what not only happens to the military, but what happens to the civilian population, and the children, and the people that are around. They're innocent, and they're just caught in the middle of everything. So it kind of toughened me up and made me a little bit harder, for what I was about to encounter. Especially going into Afghanistan the first time, right after 9/11. We didn't know. We just thought we're going to be there for a couple of months, beat up some people, get Osama bin Laden, and go home. And that wasn't the case. It just went off for 20 years. 20 years of my career, So
So, uh, as you say, your children are now in the military life as well.
they are. My middle son is actually, he's being medically retired. When he came back in his deployment, he got severely hurt on a night airborne operations, and he had to get surgery. And because of their lifestyle, um, the physical portion of it, he can no longer do it because of his sustained injury and his surgery he had to get. So he's being medically retired from the military. He just got selected for major, but he's gonna pass it over, and so he has 10 years. And my other son is now 28 years old, and he's been in since he was 17. He didn't want to be an officer, even though he could easily be an officer because he graduated college. He went to Mass Maritime. Uh, but he's enlisted. He's in E6. Um, but he's still staying in because he's in the Guard. They did activate them and send them to Africa. There was some things going on there. And there's only so many SF units in the military, so they go run through them pretty fast. So his team was sent on his deployment, but he's still in now. But he's still just doing the National Guard.
So, as we're seeing things unfold in the world that you mentioned in Croatia and stuff, how you were in Boston, how you were trying to prevent maybe a genocide, and now we're seeing the war between Russia, Ukraine, Israel, and Palestine. How do you do you see things repeating? How do you feel in relation?
So when I was in Southern European Task Force, um, the infantry brigade that was there, uh, they actually used to the element that I was part of, CTAF. They actually had a mission to train the Ukrainian uh, NZO Corps. So our element had sent many trainers to coach and teach the Ukrainians, military at that time. So, uh, you can always see, uh, I guess, what was eventually going to unfold. And even back then, but the Ukrainians, it was a very strange, it was I would call it a strange time, but there was always a requirement to train the Ukrainian military, even back then, and that was in the early, that was in the late. I'm sorry, that was in the late '90s. That was around 97, 98 time frame that they were training the Ukrainians for that time frame there, but. But Ukraine, they were never part of NATO at the time, nor are they part of NATO. So I mean, you could, start to see those kind of things unfold. Um, and I guess, you know, not speaking politically, but if you have a strong military, uh, you'll stop aggressors from being aggressive. What happened, during the times, with the fighting that was going on in the Balkans at the time, to see how the U.S. was postured and what our interests were at that time. There, you can kind of understand why things could kind of go a little sideways. And then again, um, you know, the way that we left Afghanistan, um, it really, it really showed. And again, that was probably, there's a time to retire, and I'm glad I retired when I retired because and I was sad that my children were serving in the military, were going in. I was not happy at all, but I couldn't stop them. Young men, young women make their own decisions. Um, but at that time, he retired in 2016. I could start to see the military making these shifts and changes within it. Um, Not in just my opinion, not for the good. You know, you saw what happened to it. It kind of fell apart. It really did. Um, and then the withdrawal of Afghanistan. I mean, that really hurt because, you think about everything that you went through and that others went through and all the sacrifices to just walk away from something. Now, you know, but people got to remember that the military doesn't start wars. The military just executes wars. And the wars are started by people who wear suits and ties and dresses, not military. So those who can't settle things peacefully or negotiate, they use the war machine as their way to solve what they perceive as their problem or, what they're trying to politically gain. That's how wars, you know, get to where they get. So when we went into Afghanistan, we never had an exit strategy. When we went into Iraq, we had no exit strategy. So that's how we got turmoiled into so many years of war. Again, not military. Military gives their advice, but people with suits and ties, they're the ones who make the final decision. And again, the withdrawal of Afghanistan, I don't, if you ask any, I wouldn't say any veteran, I would just say those that had served in those type of environments and, sacrificed and watched their friends and even, even those that made it home, things that had happened to them, the suicides and everything else, it's like, what was it all for? When you leave a place like that, for Afghanistan, they tried to have the Afghan, and again, when I was there in Kabul as the chief of staff, going back and forth from the embassy and what the organization that I worked for, and again, I was in the building, where they were just, going after high target values all day long. That was this floor. That's what they did. And then up here, we did other things. And so, that was what we were trying to do, and simultaneously have the Afghani government stand up and, take care of themselves, train the military, train the police. And um, it didn't quite work like the U.S. would think it would work, because those countries, their mindset, their traditions, everything else, they're not like the United States. Our kind of capitalism and democracy. That's not, you can't instill that on people. It doesn't work. And we tried very hard, and that was what the military was trying to do and help. If it just got crazy, but you don't just ever just pull the plug and leave. All the equipment, you know, personnel, it just wasn't a good thing. So once those things happen, I mean, if you look at history after that happened, it wasn't a few months after that where, Russia says, well, we're going to go back and take the Ukraine back. We're going for, because the U.S. was not, postured or seen as a a force to be reckoned with anymore. So very hard to see and very hard to watch. And all the time and all the sacrifices were absolutely for nothing. You might as well never have gone there at the first place. Truly. Um, so those things are kind of hard to watch. They really are. The way that things are handled when you see what everybody did and all the sacrifices, and still, you can't. If you watch TV, I mean, I can't watch the commercials, the Wounded Warrior, the Tunnel to Towers. You watch those commercials, and it just, to this day, it still makes me, I tear up how to watch it, because I do see, and you do remember all the sacrifices, and it's like, for what? What did we accomplish? What did we get done? We thought we were doing something important, uh, but again, as you go through time, you know, um, you stop thinking about the political side of it, or what's going on all around you. That's not your focus anymore. You're not trying to make it so that they have free elections and all the other nonsense that people would talk about. My main focus on as a leader always was just get everybody through your mission and get everybody home. That was you know, I did not care about anything around me, um, who they were, what they were. I did not care. I cared only about, my troops, making sure that they were safe, and at any cost. Because as time goes on and, you're involved in these kind of conflicts, you tend to go that way because you've seen so much, you've been around so much. You just put that off to the side, that noise off to the side. I mean, just say, all right, I gotta, let's just get through this here, and we got 9 months left. That's it. And that's what it started to get to be. You know, uh, it's sad, but as time goes on, that's what ends up happening. Uh, so when you see, when we saw how we closed out Afghanistan, it was like, okay, I'm glad that there's no more, boots on the ground or no more operations going on, but still, You, you know, what did we get from? Nothing. I mean, just a pure waste. Very sad. So it hurts. It hurts to watch that. It really does. Nothing you can do about it, but it's still not good. But it has a, a domino effect on what happens around the rest of the world. Because if you have a large you have a strong military, a tough military. It's military is not to fight wars. They are in the long. Don't get me wrong, but the real purpose, early on learning as an officer is to deter war. War is the last is your last option. You don't want war. War is not good. War is bad. War is it is not a good thing. There's nothing good about war at all. Again, war is sad because it's because people can't figure it out. They can't come to a resolution. They can't solve the problems that are in front of them. So they use the military to do it. And again, we know why we did Afghanistan. Okay, we knew why we went there. Uh, it was to get Osama bin Laden. That was the initial because the task force I was part of, that was the whole thing. We synced up with the Northern Alliance, those that wanted to push out the Taliban and, wanted some peace. You wanted peace and didn't want the Taliban. And then they wanted to get Osama bin Laden and those that were responsible for the towers coming down. Okay, once you do that, then you beat them up, you give them a nosebleed, and you go home. And you say, if you do that again, I'm going to come at you even harder. You get your point across, but escalation, 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 and then you get yourself into another one. You MDM, weapons of mass destruction, biggest farce in the world. We were just going after somebody who tried to kill his daddy way back when, and got us into another conflict at the same exact time. And then you had both. You know, you, you were fighting two major wars and two major areas, and when I was in Afghanistan the first time, initially on and again, that was most important. But then you know, Iraq was going on, and then which one was more important and which one got the resources, and we kind of went away from Afghanistan, went focused more on Iraq, and then Afghanistan started to fall apart on us again. So we never really got a full handle on it again, and the U.S. was just Iraq today, Afghanistan tomorrow, and politicians flip flopping of resources here. If misallocation of resources there, you can't finish what you're trying to start. And once we did finish it, we should have left in a proper manner, but we didn't, and then that caused others in the world to see the U.S. didn't have their act together, so might as well go invade, go after these guys here. Now, when you talked about the Palestinians, you're talking about Hamas and Hezbollah, trying to take out a country, and you've got all these factions and all these terrorist groups. Sadly, that's a sad area. I mean, I've been to that area and other things that I had to do, through Jordan and going in there, but it was a little bit more quiet. Uh, but you got Israel just fighting for their. It's not against the Palestinian people, in my opinion. It's against Hamas, Hezbollah, and anybody else from Yemen or any of the other countries. Because when you go to the war college and you go to different schools in the military, you learn a lot about history, and you have to know history because history, and they say history repeats itself, and it's very true. And you don't want to make the mistakes that others have made. And I think military. I've been to yeah, in senior service college. You study strategy, you study wars, and you study. It isn't the actual tactical part of the war you're studying. You're studying everything around it, the politics. How did we get here? What brought us to this here? What happened during this time frame here that affected this? So you really you think as a strategist, and when you become senior up, in the younger ranks, you're an operator, you're operational. And as you go to the senior ranks, you got to be on the strategy side, and then you're the GO, you get a little more political, and you're kind of up here, and you look at life a lot differently, and you have to because you're looking at a bigger picture. Down at the lower levels, you're operationally and only focused in on, what's around you, what's actually happening in front of you. You don't care about the strategic part of it. But as time goes on, you do, and you have to. So I got to a point in my career where I think I've seen a lot, learned a lot, know a lot. I don't know everything. I mean, I read a lot, I study a lot, and I have different takes on things that happen around the world right now. As you asked me, because of what I know, what I've learned, and what I've seen. I don't watch news. News to me, we don't get a lot. Like to watch. I don't learn from that. I you know learn from real world experiences. And what's really going on. So hopefully, eventually, the Palestinians. Uh, it's very sad what's happening now. You have famine, but you got a Hamas group that stopped that from happening because I didn't mention this in here when I was at Bragg my first time. We were actually invading. Uh, my gosh, what was it? Why can't I think this second here? Uh, Haiti. We were we were kind of jumping to Haiti and take over the country and topple the president, all kinds of crazy stuff, and it eventually didn't happen. And we went in, we stopped the airborne operations, and we went and landed in Port-au-Prince, and it became a humanitarian operation, other instead of a combat operation. Which, if you back then when you went there and saw what was in front of you, it was like, yeah, this was not combat. Why go? Why do we want? Why do we want to have a fight with the poor Haitians here? These poor people are starving to death in the streets, and look at what's going on. So it became a humanitarian operation. Uh, you know, so so you see those things and you learn those things, and even today in Haiti, it's gotten worse because there is no law. It's a lawless, and it's run by, military factions and small groups and, warlords. And when you look at a place like Gaza, you can't see that. But, you know, I know that because I know what it's like. I know where they are, and I know what they're trying to do. And they are trying to get food supplies to the right people. But you can't when you have warlords and factions. It goes back to Somalia, same thing. You can look at, other places in the world that had starvation and, human atrocities going on. It was warlords and military factions that were stopping, you know, good people trying to do good things to, help the innocent people. And you have the same thing going on there. But sadly, you still have a major military faction, embedded in there that's making it so it's not making it good. And it creates a PR issue. Makes, you know, Israel not look good, like they're not doing what they should be doing. They're just killing them and kill. It's not the case. Those things do happen. Collateral damage sadly happens, but they got there because some bad people did some really, the 7 October ordeal, which started the whole thing. Somebody always lights and somebody always lights the fuse. Somebody has the match and they light the fuse, and then later on, other people start throwing gasoline on it, which makes it burn even more.
Yep. Um,
So
hmm,
sadly,
yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot, obviously, all the sacrifice that's involved. So how do you react when you hear people, veterans or otherwise, say things like, the military is an amazing experience. It's like the best time to go to ice.
So, I mean, if people were to ask me, I loved my time in the military. Would I do it again? I would. Would I change anything? No, I wouldn't change it. And it's because of the camaraderie. It's the people and the military. I mean, they're still my friends today. I'm here in Massachusetts because I've been married for 38 years. My wife is from Everett, Mass. I grew up in Somerville, Mass, but I went off to a military college and then went in the military, came back, married my wife, and my wife left her family and we, lived our military life. Um, so those are hard things, but what I never would I loved the military, not war. You don't love those aspects of it. You love the people. You love putting on. You gotta love putting the uniform. I love putting my uniform on every day. I was proud of wearing my uniform every day. Um, you have assignments that you might not like. You have people, organizations you might not like. But I had that great experience, not so great experience, but then I went back into great experiences. I had great mentors, coach, teachers, and mentors that I adored and loved, and I enjoyed what I was doing. I loved I believed what I was doing. Uh, I didn't necessarily believe in the conflicts, but you know, this is the profession I chose. They say go there, do this here. Go there, you do this here. Uh, but I did love my time in the military. I didn't love the things that happened, but you can put that all off to the side and there's still a lot of good. But, even through those bad times and bad experiences and losses and everything else, you know, you have patriotism. You did it for your country because this is what your country, this is what your country was involved in, and you did it. But yeah, I would never change anything. I do love I I did love the military. I mean, I love military. I love soldiers and, look, I know what they're doing. Again, it's the political side of it I don't like. But yeah, I enjoyed my time in the military. Um, and, y- and the other thing too is that, and you'll see it in the movies. Have you ever seen the movie Hurt Locker, where he's in the grocery store and he can't even make a decision on what, um, what cereal to pick. Can't make a decision, but he can be out there and disarm any bomb known to mankind and do all kinds of, brave and pretty out of the box things. Um, and, during those times, um, regular life became very difficult. It was hard being home. I know that sounds strange. You can't explain it. Um, but it's true. You lived this life with all these people doing all these having these different experiences, and then you come home and that's not normal anymore, which becomes very abnormal. Uh, and I found, and that's what happened to me. I did that. But what happened was I wasn't home long enough to come off of that high. And as soon as I was, no matter where, if I don't know how I was always the one going. My wife would always say that too. How are you? Why is it we move here? We just move from here. We come here, and next thing you know, you're calling me up and saying you're going to back to Iraq for 15 months. Um, so life becomes very. It's not normal. And when I retired in 2016, um, it all came collapsing down on me. I mean, you came off this big high. My last assignment was a great assignment. I loved every minute of it. I loved the military. I loved what I was doing. I was proud of what I did. Um, but it was very difficult transitioning, back into life, being home, being around, not putting the uniform anymore. And it was a very, very hard time. I didn't do well with it at first. Uh, yeah, I went to some dark places and, you know, got help eventually, thank God. But, um, you know, we're not, warmongers or love death and destruction. We just love an organization, love the people, love what you're doing, and, you're just proud of what you do. So, you know, I think hopefully I answered that one there.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned in that answer, that you see what militaries do. Don't love the political aspect of it. So what is your hope for the future for both the military and the country, or even the world?
I think the military, I think right now, actually, the military is, you know, y- I always said the military is like a wheel. You start here and eventually comes back around to where you start, to where you started from. You know, you know, um, you know, the military now is finally, in my opinion, um, the f- the former Secretary of Defense was my boss when I was a battalion commander. He was my senior rater. He signed my report cards and, tell me, how well you're doing and stuff. And uh, he was a great boss. He was a great leader back then. Uh, and then became Secretary of Defense. And I don't quite know what happened uh, from when he was wearing uniform to when he put a suit on. I don't know what happens to some of these people. But anyways, uh, the the military started. I use this term, and I used it even back then when we're not allowed to talk about. In the military, you can't talk. You don't. You. That's the one thing you ever do is you never talk politics. The only political thing I ever saw in the military was when I was a company commander at Fort Bragg, and the O.J. Simpson trial was going on, and they were having people were a couple was murdered and, they started doing the tattoos and the Confederate flag thing and started clamping down on that. Uh, and that was the first time that I saw in the military, like I remember my troops were watching it in the day when we had for the barracks at our company headquarters was actually in the barracks area. It was uh, the way, the building was designed back at Fort Bragg back then. And I remember the bunch of soldiers were in the, day room, pay attention to stuff, and they're cheering and yelling and screaming. It's like, "What happened?" "Oh, Jay was, he was found it." "Okay, what do I care?" Uh, alright, fine, whatever, but that was the first time I think I ever saw a political side in the military, because you just never talked politics. You didn't matter who was president, who was in charge, it didn't matter. You still saluted and you never talked bad about him. You never said a word because you couldn't. And you should because that's not your place. The president of the United States is the commander in chief. He's your boss, whether you like it or not, whether you like what they say or you don't like what they say. It doesn't matter. I think this time here, they have a Secretary of Defense who has warrior ethos, and that's how I was brought up. I was brought up with warrior ethos. I was brought up disciplined. I was brought up to shave every day and not have long hair. I was I was brought up in a different time, and it worked. Social experiments with the military do not work, and I started my last job that I had that was starting to come into it, and I didn't like it, and that wasn't me, so it was a good thing that I did retire. But now they're getting back to those warrior ethos. They're getting back to, senior military personnel not using politicalisms inside the military because it's not good, and people make decisions for the wrong reasons, for political reasons, and when you start playing politics in the military, it just doesn't go so well. So now, I mean, their recruitments are up again. They stopped allowing certain things to go on in the military, which, in my personal opinion, doesn't have a place for it. women in the military. I love it. I had some of the great commanders my first company commander as a platoon leader was a African American black female, Diane P. Fisher, and I adored her, and she was a great leader. I never I never looked at her as she's a fe I just she was the company commander, I was a lieutenant. Yes, ma'am, I until this day, I'm still friends with her, and, she was very influential in my career as a young officer, shaped it in a great way. She was tougher than nails, and so, I mean, no one ever had an issue or problems with that, growing up. I never saw that, you know? It was other things that came into the military that in my just didn't have a place for it. You know, and women in combat, I served with women all over the place and some of the toughest and, toughest fighters, in a firefight, they're doing great. Um, and it was there was nothing wrong with it. It was fine. It's the other stuff that started to come in that hurt the military, that brought morale down, that people did not wanna be a part of and see up. And, it that is slowly getting away. They're getting rid of they got rid of or are still getting rid of senior personnel that, you know, did things for the wrong reason, and, the military is now back and, you know, very respected again, and I think it's going back in the right direction. But that's just me, just, watching from the outside. And again, I still communicate with a lot of people. I was a life coach after I retired for battalion and brigade commanders and command sergeants majors. At Fort Leavenworth, I worked for a company that did the command uh, course. So I go back and forth once a month to, coach, teach, and mentor upcoming leaders with a bunch of, bunch of other very senior people that were retired, very well respected, have books written about them and everything else. And so, I mean, I'm still in touch with people. I still know what's going on. I don't say anything. I don't have Facebook. I have LinkedIn only because the war college, they made us get it. I'm not into, the social media. I don't do any of that stuff. But I think the military is finally turning back to you stay with the war ethos, keep the social experiments away from it, and just make it the most lethal force in the world, and you will stop future wars from happening. When you become weak and people know you're weak, history shows that they'll do things, and they do. It's just going to happen. They they get brazened and bolden, and you do that. So I think right now, the military's going back in that strong direction.
So, one final question to wrap things up. You've mentioned that you had a very long career with a lot of different places and experiences. So, out of all that, is there one experience or one memory that you can pinpoint as something that you never want to let go of or never want to forget?
Uh, Well, yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, I think it was truly my as a brigade S3. Um we had a huge mission, and I made um I made acquaintances and friends that I now have like lifelong friends, and an incredible connection with them because I truly believe during that time I made a difference for, you know, less casualties. The way I conducted operations, oversaw operations, um, fought for certain equipment, was able to stand up and, say, this ain't right. Our units need this stuff just as much as So I think that was a time when I was a Brigade 3, the 7th Group. Uh, that time, even though it was a deployment, I have probably the closest friends from that time, that I don't even live in the state. They're not, they weren't even part of my units. They're from National Guard units, uh, that I have a long-lasting friendship, uh, sadly from just not a good time in life, but, um, it was the most satisfaction I think I have had in my career. Self-satisfaction for the job that I was doing. Again, bad environment. I got that part of it is not so great, but it was the outcome of it. And and I do know that I changed people's lives and careers during that time. And even throughout my whole career, you always want everybody around you to do well. If you're not self-serving. But that was probably the one that was probably the pivotal time in my life, because then it set me up for battalion command, because I commanded differently at a battalion and a brigade level because of those experiences with all these different people, you know, guard, reserve, active, in a different type of environment. Uh, that's probably the one that sticks with me the most. And again, I still, you know, on certain things that happen, certain times of the year, I get a text with a picture from a buddy that, hey, remember, hey, look at, and it always still resonates with me. And I don't think that one will ever go away from me. That one just sticks the most to me. So, but sadly, this there are deployed.
Yeah. And lastly, is there anything that you didn't touch upon that you'd like to make sure is said?
Well, I mean, I didn't get into specifics about things, because I don't think that's what people want to hear. I don't think that's what they want to hear. I know I don't want to hear, but I don't, because, um, I mean, you know what happened, you know what you did, uh, and it just needs to stay there. Uh, um, you know, I don't belong to any of the VFWs or any of those things, and I think that's why, I was even apprehensive about even doing this here. I did it because, um, Rebecca had made a comment, "Oh, we need somebody," and I just, I don't, um, like when I go places and stuff, I don't talk about the military. People asking me what I did, I just in the military. What'd you do? Oh, I didn't do much of anything. Yeah, I just did 30 years, and people like to press it and whatever. And it's not that you're not ashamed or embarrassed. I don't like to talk about it because it does bring up bad stuff. And again, I got and I didn't think the funniest thing was, uh, and I when I was with everything that I saw and even putting blankets over people, I made sure that I never cried, um, because you know soldiers could not see you be emotional. You just couldn't. You couldn't. You didn't do things emotionally. You never made decisions with emotions. You made decisions because it was the right thing to do. Uh, so I always left emotions out. Uh, and I think it was one memorial that I was in the back and I cried. No one saw me and I got emotional for the first time. And I never did. No matter what happened, people used to look and say, is he normal? Is this, and you had to be that way. You couldn't, you know, I, I remember like, uh, uh, this sergeant, he they wanted to stop a mission. They just one of his soldiers just been killed, and I had him, on. We had sapphos, and I just grabbed it and I said, "Listen, babe, stop it. Just look it. It's over. It's done. No, you're gonna finish the mission. You are not stopping. You are not pulling into the next cob. Your mission is to go to gold, and you are gonna go there, and you're gonna get there. End of story." And and, pe- and people listening to, and and this young kid is like, "Okay, I got it," and finish it off doing what he was. They finished their mission. It was pretty sad what happened. And, I don't know, there was like a month later, it was a while had passed, and, I was in the dining facility and just getting a meal, and this young sergeant came up. I didn't know who he was. I knew his name and everything, but I didn't know, 'cause, we have 4,500 soldiers in my brigade. I didn't know every soldier's name. I just didn't. And again, because I was at 3, and he just said to me, he said, "I wanna thank you for" telling me and making me finish doing it, because I understand it now. He said he said, "Then I hated your guts." He said, I knew who you were. I knew your name, and I hated you. I just hated you." And, but as time went on, I know what you were saying and why you were saying it and why you made me do it. Because now I know when that happens again, I'm ready, and I'll make sure nothing happens to anybody else. Or if it does, I know that I gotta keep pushing on, and not to get emotionally, you know, overcome by what's going on around me. And, I kept that with me, as not to try not to be emotional and cry. And, I did one time at a memorial in the back because of what happened, and it shouldn't have happened. And I coulda beat this lieutenant yeah, I could have beat him to a pulp for what happened, because he didn't listen to what he was directed to do. He was supposed to do this, and he did this. And I said, "What did I tell you to do? I told you to do this, and you did that, and look what happened." You know, But anyways, I just didn't become emotional until after I retired, and then it all like just came crashing down. I kept at this level for the longest time. And, it wasn't until I retired that it all that built up, all that, just keep going, just suck it up, just suck it up, just suck it up, suck it up, keep going. It eventually came to an end because I wasn't doing that anymore. And it's like, I'm looking around, like, I don't have my boots on, I don't have and it just came crashing down. So, I don't like to be part of these organizations. They all mean well, and they all try to do the great stuff and bring everybody, and I know why they have them. But I don't like to be around that. I don't wanna I just don't wanna always remember. I don't wanna think about it. I don't wanna talk about it. And, I don't I I don't need anybody to say thank you. I really don't. I know people mean well when they say that, um, but it's, I don't know, it's just hard. Uh, so I try to just be very on the low side. That's the past. That's formal life. That's what I did. Now, there's this next chapter in your life, and you got to focus on the next chapter, and not look. You don't look in the rearview mirror. You look in the rearview mirror to remember great people, friendships, and all those things and learning experiences. But it's not something you want to always chat about or talk about. It's one of those things. I don't know. So.